Hi there, Randy Green here. Let us continue. And in this podcast, I'm going to work with actually a physical evidence from the GAO.gov website. It is from the United States General Accounting Office, GAO, National Security and International Affairs Division from July 28th, 1995. And it is a request from Honorable Stephen H. Schiff, House of Representatives, that have asked GAO to look into the material about Majestic 12. Richard Davis, Director, National Security Analysis, is the one that has responded. And I'm going to read up, and please bear in mind that I'm Danish. I will do my very best to pronounce the words to the best of my abilities, but if there is a little glitch here and there, please bear with me and read the letter yourself. I will put the link below so you can read it yourself. So, dear Mr. Schiff, in response to your request, we asked several agencies for their views on the authenticity of the publicly circulated written material referred to as Majestic 12. The origin of this material is unknown, but it is purported to represent highly classified government records explaining unidentified flying object recovery procedures and the crash of a disc-shaped aircraft near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. Since the late 1980s, several federal agencies have been contacted by non-governmental persons and asked to comment on the authenticity of the Majestic 12 material. The agencies contacted include the Information Security Oversight Office, responsible for overseeing the information security programs of all executive branch agencies that create or handle classified national security information. The Office of the Secretary of the Air Force, Deputy for Security and Investigative Programs, and the National Archives. These agencies responded to the inquiries by stating that their knowledge of Majestic 12 was limited to the written material submitted to them by non-governmental persons. These agencies added that they found no records in their files relating to Majestic 12. Moreover, the agency's overall conclusion concerning the authenticity of the Majestic 12 written material was the same. There is no evidence that the Majestic 12 written material constitutes actual documents originally created in the executive branch. According to the Information Security Oversight Office and the Air Force, the Majestic 12 material should not be treated as if it had ever been actually classified by an executive branch agency or government official. We found nothing in our work that contradicts the conclusions reached by these agencies. We also asked the archivists at the Harry S. Truman and the Dwight D. Eisenhower libraries for their views on the authenticity of the Majestic 12 material. The archivists said that over the years they have received several inquiries from the public concerning this material. In their search for related records, including classified intelligence and National Security Council documents, they found nothing that appeared to fit the description of the Majestic 12 material or any references to this particular designation. Lastly, during our review of material received from the public by the Information Security Oversight Office in connection with the Past Freedom of Information Act requests, we came across a message dated November 17, 1980. The message, which appeared to have been originated by the Operations Division of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, contained the words MJ-12. we contacted AFOSI to AFOSI, that is the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, to determine the authenticity of the November 1980 message. In a letter dated February 28, 1995, the commander of AFOSI, Investigative Operations Center, advised us that a search of the AFOSI files failed to disclosure any official record copy of this message. The commander also advised us that in connection with an earlier Freedom of Information Act request, AFOSI had been asked to determine the authenticity of the message. At that time, they concluded that the message was a forgery. If you have any questions, please contact me on and then the following phone number from 1995. What I find interesting here, of course, this is an official letter. This is the typical official approach to the matter. There's nothing of surprise here. So it's not about looking in and saying, oh, there's some kind of conspiracy going on there. This is what people know. This is from an honorable person that is just responding to what he has investigated and what he has come up with, trusting the different organs of information. And these organs, they are the Information Security Oversight Office. And I find that interesting. They're responsible for overseeing the information security programs of all executive branch agencies that create or handle classified national security information. And I have got no answers there, but there's a thing in me that says what they know of. Okay? The Office of the Secretary of the Air Force, Deputy for Security and Investigative Programs. And again, for me, these are more, and then instead of when we talk about paperclip and blue book and all of these things that, again, I advise you to look that up and in either via Stephen Greer or Richard Dolan. Or many of the other ones that you can go to MoveOn and their YouTube channel or whatever and get the information about what that is and how others have perceived that. But I find that 10 times more interesting in these, what we call within the base program, knowledge-based information groups that we have that are working with this and how they are working with overseeing the information security programs. How much are they overseeing? They are collecting information. They're probably getting, whenever someone creates something, they have databases, they have all of that information. So that rests upon what's been given to them or what they can collect or what they can gather. So that we already understand, well, there are glitches here, even though he works, this guy, Richard Davis here, he asks what is known. So this is what is known. Just because it's said it's not there and they have gotten evidence of any and they can't find anything does not mean that it doesn't exist. It just means what they know of, what they have been given, what they have been collecting. And if we work with the idea that I strongly agree with Richard Dolan and Ron James when they say there is no paper trail, I completely agree with that, because a secret program that is to be kept out of the eyes of the public, different security programs and all of the controller of the executive branch agencies and onward and so forth, would be to not create a paper trail, would be to give information that is verbal only, that is briefing without recordings of the briefing, that is talk within smaller groups that are being giving that information and being asked not to hand it over. Plus, for those of us who are familiar with how the different groups that are of the other worlds are operating inside this reality, they can wipe the minds. They can intercept information systems. They can put in different types of information into the human brain if they like. They can scramble what we know and what we talk about and what we're capable of remembering. So this is also part of that understanding that we are here talking about very difficult levels of validification process. So we can't verify any of this because there has not there's not any trail to verify it. Similarly, when we talk about the ancient civilizations that didn't have things written down in paper, which led to the 1900 scientists in Germany and other ways around the world under the old white men type of scientific paradigm, where men were the top notch of knowledge as well as the white people, which we of course know is completely not true, because all the great civilizations began in India or Africa and other places that had nothing to do with the later incoming quote unquote Indo-Aryan races, which actually originated in Asia as well as in India and in the Indus Valley, where we had the Brahims and some of the very advanced Raja civilizations, including some of the very advanced civilizations in Africa, which unfortunately fell apart due to infight and difficulties there, which goes with the podcast series of the rise and fall of civilizations. I'll put a link to that one below so you get a little bit of history there. But to put that in, so this kind of hybris of claiming to be the only ones in the know and everybody's primitive because there's no paper trail or no evidence of how smart they were, well, perhaps that's because when we look into that we can only claim some kind of sovereign or superiority or some advancement by what they leave behind. Well, what if it's fourth dimensional? What if it's not of this world? What if it's through communication? What is about telepathic communication and downloads that doesn't need to be written down because it's already in the brain, and the ones that are part of these projects, they all get the same downloads? Another great question to be asked. So that's also when we talk about this, that we cannot really go in and verify any of this. So when someone, Congress or House of Representatives or whatever, goes in and asks, "Oh, give me evidence of this so I can work with this and I can brief the others of Congress," or whatever, which we know Stephen Greer done with some and onward and forward. It's not that there has not been information out there. It's just because it can't be verified and there is no paper trail and there's no real hardcore evidence, then it's dismissed and said, well, this is something that people are coming up with. This is bogus, as we will see that the FBI has written over some other papers that have been generated in the 1980s, which I think are created for a purpose. Not that they are bogus, but I think they were created for a specific purpose, which I will work with when I get to that podcast. So that's the important thing that we work with here, is that we're working with things that can't be verified. And with that, we must also be very careful not to go down the path of speculation, pure speculation. We can speculate as much as we like. We can come up with as many fancy ideas as we like. And we come up with as many power theories as we like. But this does not make them true. And not because 1,000 people talk about the same theory doesn't make it true. It just means that 1,000 people are talking about the same theory, because that's what we got right now. So one of the things we need to work with when we work with this information is the scientific method of working with theories. A theory is only there as a working tool. It's not the truth. It's a working tool from where we can process other levels of information. And I will put link to a lecture of one of from MUFON that actually has a guy who explains a little bit about that to people, which I'll just put in there so you get that one too. It's not from him I got this information. Remember, I studied the bachelor degree, and I took my exam, and I got the bachelor degree from the University of Copenhagen, where you put through the scientific method. It's a whole semester where you learn the scientific method. So it's not from him. I'm just putting it in there for those of you who have not attended universities. You will then get an insight into how some of these things work. So when we work with sources of information, it's important to understand, how much can we rely on that information? How much can we claim that we can base our theory on that information if it is insufficient? And then we know we can't just speculate. The crap out of ourselves, to put it that way. We can't just speculate to the degree that people would like, because then it becomes similar as we had in the Middle Ages, where everybody was just speculating on everything and putting in their own projections and their own distortion energies and their own subconscious material. And before we know it, we have this huge thing going on where everybody loses their footing. And we get into some kind of hyper exaggeration. That's a kind of a pleonasm. It's a double meaning. It's hyper, it's both above, but it's also an exaggeration, which is over emphasizing things that are not real or not true. So we're in this kind of hyperbolic way of working with information that is not serving any purpose for us. And that's why I refer to Richard Dolan and Stephen Greer's, because they have used the scientific method to keep it simple and keep it to the as much as they can, and not speculating too much. And I will ask of you to do that too, because some of you will read this and you say, oh, he's lying and whatever. No, let's work with concepts that begins with being harmless, where we approach the people who've been working with this has been honest people doing their job and do it to the best of their abilities. They are not cheaters or deceivers or whatever. They're not put in there to make sure that the public doesn't get the information. They are people like you and me, working with what they know from what they know and from the paradigms and the programs that they are part of. Honest people doing their job as they're supposed to, and honest to the degree that most people are. Just ask yourself how honest you are all the time, right? So with that saying, again, we need to be as honest as we can and as authentic as we can in this work too, where we are honest with ourselves and say, is this kind of speculation? Am I now going down a trajectory of information that is based upon what I want to perceive of it and not what's actually standing there? So that's this where we take off the glasses of our own projections and our own ideas and our own frames of references and look in and say, okay, are these frames of references actually outdated? Should they be updated? Should we look at this from a different angle? And that's why we also understand that our mental capacity, our brain capacity, always work from the frames of references that we have created. So if we are in knee deep into the conspiracy theories, well, then that is what we will look at. That's the angle. If we are in knee deep that we are distrusting all public information systems and agencies of information giving, programs or what have you, well, then that will be the angle where we will distrust everything, to the degree that we actually miss so much of the information because we are so eager to distrust everything and just say it's bogus or just put it aside and we don't want to work with it or whatever. And then we'll end up with nothing and we'll have to come up with our own ideas, and that does not make them more true. So that's also part of the pioneer mindset, as in what is out there, what is consensus-based, because science work on consensus-based ideas. Similar when we work within the different agencies, similar when we work within the different levels of reality. We work within specific paradigms or frames of references from where we operate. And that's important to understand. So when we look at this letter and my general feeling in this one, the energy I get of it, is actually from a hardworking guy who has done what he needs to do and has come up with actually a pretty fair and well investigated answer. So there's nothing there that for me says that this is made up or in any ways or forms have been put there to throw people off. He's talking from the level of knowledge he has and from the level of information he has been given. And in that he's authentic and clear. And it is important to notice here, the takeaway from that is that there is no records of Majestic 12. And that's why I put it in there. So I got a little bit of to talk about that there are so many people within the different agencies and within the government that has absolutely no idea. And they are just honest people doing their everyday job like everybody else. So let's begin with that one, because I know that's a thing when we talk about Americans and how you perceive reality and what's going on over there. Remember, I'm from Denmark, where things work a little bit different. We have great great transparency to the degree that is possible in all ways and forms. And I grew up with the understanding that no matter what position you have in the world, you're still a human. And the only thing you can do is to be an honorable person and do the very best you can, not to cheat and not to lie and not to deceive and not to create deception, but in all ways and forms, be the best version of a human you can be. So that's my basic paradigm from where I work. So until further proven, I expect whatever I read and whatever I look into to come from people that are doing the very best they can from their reality and from who and what they are and from within what kind of paradigm or frame of reference that they are working. So beginning with that one, takeaway here is that it has been investigated already back in the 1990s about Majestic 12. We have, as far as they know, they don't know where it began or where it came from, this material. And it has, we are here getting some kind of request on highly classified government records explaining unidentified flying object recovery procedures and the crash of a disc-shaped aircraft from Roswell. And we have had since the 80s, several federal agencies have been contacted by non-governmental persons, that means everyday citizen, and asked to comment on the Majestic 12 material. And these are some pretty heavy organs or institutes or agencies that have been asked. So it's not because they don't know of it, but they have decided that that does not exist. So they have turned the deaf ear to this kind of information. And that goes with what we could say the way that things have been perceived and worked with so far. Okay, so that's the important thing here. So, and it's interesting to say the very neat way and fine way that they put this. The agency's overall conclusion concerning the authenticity of the Majestic 12 written material was the same. There is no evidence that the Majestic 12 written material constitutes actual documents originally created in the executive branch. There is no evidence. Because they don't have evidence, then they conclude that they can't find any trail or any proof that it's there. But that does not mean that it's not there. It just means there's no evidence. Okay? So that's the way we should be looking into that one. So with that, again, he says, we found nothing in our work that contradicts the conclusion. We found nothing in our work. How much work? How deep did they dig? How many, aside from what he referred to, what he has asked? Has he talked to 3 people, 20 people, 200 people, and onward and so forth? So with that, also asking some of the archivists at the libraries and what their view on the authenticity of that was. And they said, well, we have received this and whatever, but we have not found anything particularly that they could fit the description of the Majestic 12 material. They found nothing that appeared to fit the description of the Majestic 12 material, or any references to this particular designation. So what is the fit? What is the description? What were they looking for? Okay. Lastly, during our review of material received from the public and so forth, the message which appear again contain the words, and they also came to the conclusion that it was a forgery. How did they come to that conclusion? What were they basing that conclusion upon? They advised us that a search of AFOSI files failed to disclosure. So that means if there's something that is within the parameter of non-disclosure, is there information that they have not got access to? And official records, copy of that message. Official records. What about the non-official records? So these are the questions that we ask. So even though we get a letter like that, we can't write it off and say it doesn't exist. We can say within the known organs of what has been disclosed and what has been on official record and what has been put into the libraries and what has been accessible for the ones that have looked at it, they find no evidence. But that doesn't mean that it's outside, that there's information outside these agencies. There are within the private contractors. There are paper trails within the businesses that are part of this, whether they are bills or invoices or whatever it is. It might not be this big document telling us what's going on, but there is definitely a paper trail. And I know Stephen Greer has been following some of these paper trails as well, which is why I recommend that you look into his material. So again, has been asked to determine the authenticity of the message, and they concluded it was a forgery based upon what they know, what they have access to, and what they could find, and their paradigms and their frames of references, and how they wanted to perceive this, and whether or not they actually really wanted to look into it because they had their careers at stake. So that is the big takeaway here. So with that, we have now laid the foundation of, okay, we work with people are generally trying to do the very best. We work with the idea that the ones that are looking into this are perhaps not always looking to the best of their abilities. They are looking within different groupings of information that is provided to them. They have not got access to all of the information in the world, and most of the information are within private contractors. That means outside of governmental agencies, that these secret projects are not part of the fiscal budget of the United States government. They are not visibly accessible for the public. You can't go in and say, pass Freedom of Information Act and go in and say, well, I want to look into due to the Freedom of Information Act. I want to see what the government is doing. What you will get is what the government is doing, because this is outside the scope of governmental programs and agencies. And I think that's the most important takeaway here, which I know both Richard Joland and Stephen Greer is also working with that idea. So with that, we have laid the foundation of stop trying to pin it on to that someday some disclosure will come from the government. Someone will step forth and say, yes, we know about these programs. Because my general experience and my foundational feeling and perception and what I know of and what I have given of information is that if anyone knows of this, it is minute, it's hearsay, it's speculative. It has not been treated as an official information system, as we know with the Pentagon report. That came later on in the early stages of this one. Nobody in their wildest minds wanted to go into this. And we know we had CIA and other organs that were, or agencies that were doing their very best to shut this down the moment it was talked about, so it wouldn't become what we could call generally accepted information. It was fringe, it was not accepted, and by that, whatever could have created a paper trail were removed or were erased or were not put on record or were not put into the libraries or what have you. And the ones that were part of this, the ones that had the information, censored themselves, shut down their own information. What they had of experiences, they kept to themselves because they didn't want to lose their jobs. So this is very important when we go into talking about these things, that we understand. Again, let's get it into the arena of where we begin to trust each other again, and also understand there are human motives behind everything. And most of the motives are based upon fear of loss, or fear of being ridiculed, or fear of losing that one income they have that actually pay the bills and give them food on the table and provide for their families. And that's also to taken into consideration. Thank you.